Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy Friday. We made it. Super excited to see all of you here in today's chat. Now, before we get going and introduce our speakers and really dive into today's event, let's go down for some quick housekeeping items. So, my name is Meg. I am part of Power to Fly's virtual hosting team, and I'm going to be your host today. Now, for this session, like all of our virtual events, it is all about you. It's about our participants. It's about our community members. We want to make sure that you get real value out of these events. So you can do that via participation. We encourage it and we welcome it, we foster it, and you can do that in a couple different ways. So if you would like, you are free to turn your cameras on, share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. There's no need to be Instagram perfect, y'all. I'm on day 4 of dry shampoo messy bun. I don't care if you are at a kitchen table, an ironing board in your closet. Bring us your non-traditional workspaces. Bring us your furry coworkers. Bring us your child supervisors. Please feel free to join us wherever and however you are. We pride ourselves on meeting you where you are, no matter where in the world. Now, if you do want to participate in other ways in today's session, you absolutely can. Now, just as a warning, you will show up on the live recording if you come off of mute for any reason during today's event. So I highly recommend that you make sure that you are muted now. I can make sure everybody stays muted, but it's going to make sure that audio clarity is good on the call for everyone, and so that everyone here can hear what's going on, and our recording is good for later, especially if you want to go back and review it. Now, if you do have questions or comments for our speakers, you can always let us know. We'd love to hear about it. So you're going to put those questions or comments into the group chat. I'll be sharing a bunch of links and stuff in there as well, but please feel free to, connect with your fellow attendees. We absolutely love to see what y'all are doing, the connections you're making. And we'll be sharing links up there as well for a lot of great resources and some of the stuff we talk about today. Now, like I did say earlier, today's session is being recorded. We're actually live streaming it right now to our YouTube channel as well as to our website. And we're recording today's session. Now, that means that if you are here with us today, we're so happy you came to be here for the live recording. If you are watching it from the future, hi from the past, we're so happy you're watching this or rewatching this. Everyone that registered for today's session is going to get an email in about 1 to 2 business days, and that's going to contain a link to where you can rewatch today's recording. Now, if you hear something that is just so mind-blowing today, it's so amazing, you cannot wait to share it with a coworker or a friend or a relative. You do not have to wait the 1 to 2 business days. So you can always head over to our YouTube channel. Again, I'll share the links to all of this kind of stuff in the chat thread as we go through today's event. But you can always head over there. The video will be posted usually within about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of the live stream. And you can share those, share that link wherever you'd like. Please feel free, spread the knowledge, spread the wealth. Please feel free to take photos or video as we go. Let your social media network know that you are learning with Power to Fly. We would love to share or retweet or, in any way help bolster your posts. Just feel free to tag us. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We have great stuff that comes out of all of those social channels. We share resources, job postings, videos about like how you can meet the recruiters from various companies. So absolutely, I'd recommend that you check us out on those various social media platforms and follow us if you'd like. You can also take a look at a huge section of our library of recorded chats on our YouTube channel, or you can search them all on our website. So definitely tons of great free resources available to you today. Before we dive into our speakers, I'm really excited to share with you all. They are here on behalf of Nacelle today. Now, I'm going to share Nacelle's link for their company page on powertofly.com with you in just a moment here. It's going to look much like what you're seeing in front of you right now. This is where you can go to check out more information about Nacelle. You can learn about their benefits. You can get information on some of the roles that they have open. You can check out events that they've partnered on with us before, as well as events that they're going to do in the future. Now, if you are interested in Nacelle, or you hear something today on today's chat that makes you interested, if you go to search those jobs and there's really not something that suits you right this second, that is totally fine. What I recommend that you do is you go to the top of the page, top of Nacelle's company page. Upper right-hand corner will be a button that says follow. If you follow that company, it's going to do a couple of really great things for you, but effectively it works like your friend at the company. So it tells Nacelle that you are interested in working with them before you ever fill out a job application. And then Power to Fly lets you know when they post new roles. So we keep you updated. You don't have to waste time going back and checking and rechecking job boards. So to get us moved into our speakers today, I'm really excited to introduce you to the two people that Nacelle had sent to us to discuss such amazing topics today. So first up, we have Mary. Now, Mary is an experienced technology leader with more than 20 years in software development. Now, Mary has led cutting edge teams which leveraged open source solutions, created reusable frameworks and components for software products, and she's led initiatives to adopt modern architectures. Now, Mary's career journey began as a developer and an architect, and she's since evolved to leading and managing highly talented engineers. Mary, we are so happy to have you join us today. Thank you so much for sitting in on today's panel. Now, joining Mary from Nacelle is Andrew Stucky. So Andrew is an experienced software engineer with specializations in distributed systems architecture and design. Andrew is skilled in cloud computing, identity and access management, machine learning, Kafka, and Java. Now, Andrew believes that every business has challenges that can be solved with software, and his job is to turn that statement into a reality. We are so happy to be joined by both of you on today's call. Before we dive into questions, last thing we're going to talk about are some of the main takeaways that you can expect to gain from today's event. So these are some of the themes that we've identified, both from conversations with Mary and Andrew, as well as by looking at the questions that you all submitted when you registered. So if you have a question that you want to dive in more deeply, or something that the panelists say really strikes you, or you want to dive in more and expand on that, let us know in the chat. We can't ask the questions if we don't know that that's what you want to know. So help us to make sure that this event is well worth your time. We're going to talk a little bit about some technical skills that are going to help you to work faster and more efficiently. We're going to discuss some ways to develop soft skills that would help you thrive in your role. And we're also going to talk about the importance of ownership and that two-way communication that is so helpful for career growth. So let's dive in here and start from a question that was very popular as we were reviewing questions that y'all submitted today. Hold on, y'all. I just realized I moved my questions list and can't find it. Oh, there it is. Sorry. All right. So to get us started today, let's talk a little bit about students. What advice would you like to give to students who are currently pursuing engineering? What advice would you give them that can help them moving forward into their careers? Mary, would you like to start us off here?
Sure. One of the things that Andrew and I often discuss in terms of new engineers is really that they should be really focused on learning the basics. There's a lot of information in our field, there's a lot to learn, but you really need to make sure that you've got a good foundation in understanding the basics. The second thing that's really important as you get going in your career is really, do you have a passion? Because if you really want to be successful in engineering, having a passion and love for it is really going to get you a lot further. So I would think about, where is your passion? And if it's, really learning all the different areas of technology, because you might have a passion in one area over another. For example, I worked with a gentleman who developed a passion for user experience. So he was in engineering, developed this experience when it was very new and nascent, and ended up really amazing growth in his career because of that passion, and ended up working at a very high level at Netflix, for example, and PayPal as in vice presidents and very C-level positions. So I think if you can find your passion in this field, you will do very well, because it'll naturally drive you.
Love that. Andrew, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I can totally touch on learning the basics just a little bit more too. The CS program can be challenging, or appear challenging to some, but there's kind of a concept of a double bell curve that professors might talk about, where half the students do really well and half the students may not do well. And there's been a lot of research into why that might be. And I think the reason we touched on earlier is, having a good base to build upon is really important in engineering. You learn the basics, and then like concepts begin to build on top of other concepts. Then you get into these like really abstract concepts, and it starts to make sense why someone who may learn slightly differently than the rest of the class, or a professor that isn't passionate anymore, because it does happen. So, sometimes it's hard. So learn the basics, have a passion for it, and I think you'll be just fine.
Excellent advice. Thank you both. Now, how does that advice change if you are talking to somebody who didn't go to a traditional four-year university route? There's a lot of people who are career changers who are trying to transition into engineering. There's also people that, do boot camps or try and kind of do independent study to learn these things. So what advice would you have for them? Andrew, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely possible. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I'll give you. I know a ton of people who weren't like traditional CS degree people. I don't have a CS degree, for example. So I'd say, don't rely on job training. You can get pretty far on your own. And you will get more experience in the job, but there's plenty of other things you can do proactively to make sure that you're ready for the job. There's a bunch of great books and resources that are free or easy to purchase. One great example is Cracking the Coding Interview. That is by Gail Lockman McDowell. And then there's also some great online courses. I think Stanford University frequently publishes their courses that are free to take. So yeah, just use the internet. It's there for you. It's your friend.
Excellent. Mary, how about you?
Yeah, I would add to that. We talked about getting in the basics, and the boot camps and that kind of training is a good start. The Cracking the Design Interview, that gives you a big picture of all the different areas that you should be familiar with, and resources, links to resources on how you might learn and gather deeper knowledge in those areas. But then beyond that, so that's the basics, foundation of coding. Then I would take it another level of systems design, because if you are coding, it's one thing you can write a function, but another thing to understand the impact in a distributed system, for example, and what your errors, if you're throwing it, might impact downstream. So I think it's important to layer your education. Start with the foundations, look at all the coding and the algorithms and understand those deeply, and then move into systems design and build upon it. And then finally, if you have the opportunity, I know back in the day, they used to do, your own portfolio applications that you would do. I actually would recommend, while that's fine, go and look at open source projects and contribute to those, for the reason of, one, you will be introduced to code reviews, so you'll get feedback from people and you'll have an interaction and understand their thinking of why the way you did something might be improved upon. And then secondly, it also allows you to see other people's patterns. So you'll see a typical problem emerge in various functions that you can then learn from and apply in your own code. So I think that that's a great way to layer and build on your education.
I absolutely love that idea of layering your education and not just relying on one stream or one source for it. I think that's the very, very smart advice. Thank you. Anything else before we go to our next question? Yeah? All right. And I want to encourage y'all in the chat thread there, if you want to ask questions to our speakers today, please feel free. You can put them into the group chat if you'd like, or you can DM me directly if you'd like to be kept anonymous. But please let us know, how are you feeling about some of the answers our team is giving today? Maybe your lived experience has been somewhat different. So please feel free to share with us. All right. Now, one of the things that is very common question is like, do I have to know how to write code? Do I have to have a background in this? In your opinion, do you think it's possible to move up in engineering leadership if you don't have a background in writing code? Mary, what do you think?
I would highly not recommend that. I think that, first of all, if you have a passion I think you just do better if you have that background in terms of serving the engineers that you're helping to guide in their careers, having that experience. That said, I don't think it's an absolute, non-starter. I think that there are some instances, I don't know if they exist so much anymore, but companies that might have off-the-shelf products that they're supporting that might need a manager of those teams that do the configuration and management of those. They might, an engineering manager that doesn't really have deep coding experience might be fine. But if you really have a passion in engineering, you learn to be able to empathize with the engineers and the things that they're up against, and be able to resolve problems that face your squad a little bit better and more effectively than otherwise, in my experience. Andrew, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I've seen this happen successfully a couple of times. And generally it's when someone has experience in like kind of a tangential or very closely related position, like thinking about project management, being a scrum master, a quality engineer, and then starting to pick up on some of those skills along the way, being able to empathize with other parts of kind of the engineering life cycle, and then moving into engineering management, kind of taking a different course to getting there. But it's definitely not the primary road, in my opinion.
I love that kind of answer, because you're right. There's a lot of times this sort of depends. But I think coding can be one of those things that sounds really kind of scary if you're maybe not familiar at all with it, if you're maybe somebody that's transitioning into engineering. But yeah, I love the advice of, if you have that passion, you do want to know more kind of holistically about the field you're going into. It's one of those things that never really made sense to me until I got into a field that I actually had passion for. And then I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about. Okay, this makes a lot more sense. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about, kind of moving along just in general terms. One person had asked or had written into us saying there are a lot of resources out there for women to get started in coding, but what happens after? They said, it's been 2 years since I joined tech, but I don't know what to do to make the next leap and become a senior developer. Should I be focused on things like outside courses or mentorship or getting a graduate degree to make this happen? So, what would you say to someone who is 2 years into this career path, but doesn't really know what else they should be doing? Once you've gone to school, you've gotten, your certification, your degree, whatever, and then you've applied and gotten the job. Okay, but now what? Andrew, what is, from your view, what should be kind of the next step forward?
Yeah, I think it's our field moves very quickly. So sometimes there's unreasonable or large amounts of pressure to want to go to the next stage, whether that be mid-level developer from a junior developer, mid-level developer to a senior developer. Like, that pressure does exist. So I guess I try to always reiterate, like, don't rush. It's a journey. Let your passion lead you, and start to be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of other engineers around you. What are they contributing that you can use as kind of a guiding light? That senior engineer that just did a code review for you, what were they looking for in the code review? How could you make the code review go smoother? Things like that you can kind of look up to, kind of adopt those patterns and then implement them yourself. So I'd say that's probably, my most important advice I could give you. Some other things you could do are take additional courses. There's tons of great books. Got stacks of books, I think, that I've just read over the years. You can never read too much. Always learning from someone else's kind of path will get you pretty far. So I think those are my important things. I know Mary probably has a couple to add as well.
Yeah, Mary, what's your opinion on this? Like, where, especially as somebody who is a female in engineering, do you think that your advice changes at all for women in this field?
A little bit, but not a lot. I would say that what Andrew said was spot on in terms of learning from other people and using code reviews really as a learning opportunity, and not just, oh my God, they're criticizing my work. Everybody, no matter what your gender, or you need to just use those as a learning opportunity. I always, in my career, would seek out people that I wanted to emulate, the people that I thought were really strong in my career. And I would set up, can I have coffee with you? And I would pick their brain and get, information from them. What are the, what do you do regularly to stay up on technology? What things do you think I should be working on? If you're proactive, again, it goes back to passion. If you're passionate about what you do, this comes naturally. You're just going to want to be a sponge and seek out the people and the resources that will help you. But I think for in general, just don't rushing is really a big thing, and don't feel the need to rush, because in the technical track, at least, there is generally in most organizations I've worked a pretty big band of salary. So you will incrementally, you won't have to go to the next level to increase your salary as fast like we did in the past. So I think that that's a good thing for the current environment. So I don't think there's really a need to rush. 2 years is really still very young, and there's so much to learn. And just, I would just say, just enjoy the job that you have, be a sponge, and I think that you'll do very well. The last thing that you can do, no matter what level you are in your career, is to demonstrate what you learn and share it. So I would suggest that as you learn things, set up lunch and learns, be proactive. Don't feel like you have to be asked to do something. As a woman, that's where I think it's a difference.
Yes.
I always felt like I was constrained and I was waiting for somebody else to tell me, oh, you should do this or you should do that, or give me permission to be able to set up these things. Throw that notion out the door. Be empowered, feel that empowerment, and own your career, and go out. And if you learn something, share it with the people. If it's on a Slack channel, hey, here's a link to something I just learned. Or, hey, I'd like to have a book club. I'm reading this book. If you're interested, let's get together and talk about it. Or, whatever it might be, but be proactive and be enthusiastic about it, because when you do these things, you may learn other things that relate to what you just learned. So it just has a great effect, a snowball effect for you if you leverage that. So.
I love that advice, because it is definitely something that not only serves you in your career at the moment, but effectively you're setting yourself up in leadership positions. You're showing that you are curious and you are proactive, and that you want to share that info with others, which is a huge part of leadership. So I love that advice, Mary. And you're right. I mean, it can feel, whether you are transitioning, whether this is your second, third, fourth career, or even if you are, 18 and still just, raring to go to get into the workforce, it can kind of feel like you need to hit the ground, not just running, but like full on sprinting. So I love that advice to not rush, stay curious, keep learning things, and then share that knowledge. I absolutely love this. All right, so let's kind of turn the tables here and talk about how you can identify which skills that you need to improve or develop to keep moving. Now, I know we kind of positioned this more in the line of soft skills. Mary, do you want to start us off here, and then Andrew, you can follow her?
Sure. Self-awareness is a big thing. You should get comfortable with, no matter what your career is. But really, really hearing the feedback that you're given is important, because it's one thing to hear the words, but there's another one to digest it and think about it and retrospect on it. And some of the signs that you might see yourself doing that might be getting in your way of learning is, are you interrupting people all the time? So you're not really taking the time to hear what's being said. Some other, as far as learning about soft skills also, I would say, obviously asking your colleagues, big thing. A lot of companies have anonymous 360 survey tools that you might have available to you that you could use to get candid feedback. There's online assessment tools. But the one thing when you're doing the online assessment tools that I would recommend, if you do that, is to really be honest when you answer about how you would actually act, and not what you think that you would act, right? So how do you really act? Because you're going to get the most the more realistic picture about yourself and how to work on it if you're more if you're genuine in your answers to that. And I know there's other ones that Andrew can answer about, but there was one other thing, that a tool that I've used for many years, and there are recent additions on it, is a book. It's called For Your Improvement, and it's very thick. So that looks like this. And it has all these different competencies listed in it. Like half the book is just, here's all the competencies. You look them up and it'll tell you if you're underskilled in that competency, what the signs are, if you're skilled, or if you're, you're overusing that particular skill. So, and then it gives you a lot of resources. I would highly recommend something like that if you're really wanting to develop and evaluate your soft skills. So Andrew probably has other ones he'd like to add.
I love that. Cynthia had asked in the chat about the name of the book. I'm going to pull that up. I'll get you all a link and throw it into the chat here. But I absolutely love the sound of that book. I cannot wait to read it because this is something that improving in my profession feels kind of weird, because it's like, okay, we'll just talk to people better. Like, oh, okay. So I'm really excited to check this out. Super excited. Andrew, please feel free. Let us know, what do you think is key to helping do that kind of self-awareness and self-diagnosis?
Totally. I'll double down on hearing feedback. Being self-aware and being able to hear when others are providing you that feedback. Then like providing yourself space after you hear the feedback. It's one thing to like say you hear it and then act on it. It's hard. Even I struggle with it. I struggled with it probably my whole life, but I found one thing that's really successful for me is to just walk away, like hear it, listen, walk away, think about it. Don't react to it. Just like try to understand it better. Everybody that's telling you something in the feedback world, they want to help. They're not telling you that most of the time to like hurt you or put you down. They do really have kind of the best interest in heart, or at least I like to think that they have the best interest in heart. So yeah, but that space between when you initially hear it and kind of allowing yourself to mull on it, it's critical, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's really all I got.
That honestly, I love that you circle back to that, because Mary, you saying about the feedback, totally. I love what you guys are saying about kind of really listening to it, because you're right, Andrew. People don't generally give you feedback for no reason. They do it because they have interest. They think you can do better. They want to help with that, or want, at least at the very minimum, they want you to improve. So it is really important to actually hear the feedback. And honestly, I think about it in terms of like the source a lot of times, like if somebody's giving me feedback that I haven't asked for, then that's, one way to kind of like take it in stride and think like, okay, well, I didn't ask for this, so it's clearly not something that I even see on my radar. So I love that idea of not only just considering the method that it was intended, it was intended to help. And you're right. Like there's a lot of times people tell you stuff that is not easy to hear, and it's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable with feedback. Like being uncomfortable doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means that like you need to sit and really reflect and see like, okay, is this advice that I can follow? Is this actionable? Is this feedback that, about something that I'm trying already to change? Really consider it from the perspective of, the person that's outside of you. We judge ourselves by our intentions, but other people by their actions. So it can be very hard to take feedback that, is intended well, but feels a little uncomfortable to receive. So I love that. Okay, so let's move on and talk a little bit more about, people from, sort of non-traditional backgrounds into tech. Do you have any suggestions or tips for people who are neurodiverse and entering or trying to navigate the tech world? And for those of us who are joining, or for those of you who are joining that maybe haven't heard neurodiverse as a term before, as like a protected class, neurodiversity started with basically more referencing Asperger's and autism, but as it's become a more widely understood term, you see how it's kind of a much bigger tent. So, people who are dyslexic are considered neurodiverse. I have ADHD and bipolar disorder, so I have so much fun, a party bag to bring to the table. But yeah, like it's a big tent and can cover a lot of different things. But basically, if your brain works in a different way than like a neurotypical brain does, boom, you're neurodiverse. So what feelings do you all have on this? Have you experienced having neurodivergent individuals on teams with you? What have you seen and experienced in your career? Mary, do you want to start us?
Sure. I have had experience with that in the past, but I would start out by saying the good news, the great news is more and more employers are really supporting this, finding ways to support neurodiversity in their organizations. I think that's a huge, and it's become a real hot topic in recent years. So I'm very excited about that because I feel like there's so many untapped creative people that I think would lend themselves very well to our industry. So it's very exciting. In terms of my experience with them, I think this was many years ago before this was even really defined and well known. And it was unknown that this person had this struggle. And it turned out once I learned of it and they were diagnosed, it was so much easier. I could support them. Things got so much better on the team, and this person was highly, highly successful. So I guess the takeaway is making sure that you find the support where you're working. And if there isn't a support mechanism, find close, friendships that you can lean on. And then there's a lot of online support groups that are popping up now, I know. And Meg, you may even have suggestions for folks on the call about some of those. But definitely, I think support is the number one factor in your success. It's true for everybody, and particularly for this, I think, based on my own experience, that just this person blossomed as soon as they had the support. So I would just very highly recommend getting your support in place.
Yes, I love that. I have a couple ideas on places you can get support from, people who have similar concerns or similar conditions to you. I found support from the bipolar community hugely, hugely helpful. And I'm also in that point, like I'm 35, I've only been diagnosed for 2 years. And so, knowing that I had ADHD was like one of those things that helped me to approach like education differently. But I didn't know until I was 33 that this was an underlying factor in a lot of stuff. And you're right, once you identify that, the path forward is a lot clearer. So like hugely helpful, scary, but hugely, hugely helpful. And Mary, I cannot second enough your point about asking for what you need. It's very hard. It is incredibly difficult, but check out resources, especially if what you're struggling with falls under like the ADA compliance statute, if that's like a protected class. Check out the ADA's website. That'll give you ideas on what some common accommodations or workarounds that might be possible for you to ask for. And if you don't know the way forward, that's okay. Tell them, I'm not quite sure what works best for me. I'm still trying to identify that. Keeping that open communication is huge. And it's like you said, it's huge on behalf of companies to be talking about this kind of stuff, because when no one's talking about it, it can feel really like even harder to bring these subjects up. Andrew, what have your experiences been like? Have you worked with neurodiverse individuals? What have you seen?
Totally. Yeah. And it's kind of like, as a manager, it's my job to meet you where you are, to be there to support you. So kind of a blanket piece of advice is like, when you're going through the interviewing process, also interview your manager. Like, you can ask questions of them, make sure that they are going to support you in your role, because that is their job. Like, that's our job as managers. So having a good manager that can support you will take you so much further than being kind of like miserable and in a place where you don't have good management. So that's one piece of advice. Another one is like, yeah, totally know your know your accommodations, know yourself as well as you can, so that way we can have good conversations. So I can help you. That's all I got.
Very, very cool. No, I love this. You're right. Maintaining that communication, doing like asking that of your managers. I mean, like this person is your manager. They're supposed to help you to get the best possible work product for you, like from you for the company. So this is not an extra layer of like, well, I'm asking for special treatment. No, you're trying to be proactive. You're trying to make sure, how can I be an effective member of this team? So I think you're right, Andrew. It's very important to keep in mind that you're not trying to get special treatment. You're trying to make it so that you're on a level playing field with everybody else, that you can, contribute to the team. You can be, impactful in that work. I love that. Okay, so let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about, people who are in that fully remote era. So a lot of us, some of us like myself, I've been remote for 3.5 years. So I got to transition slowly and not in a pandemic and, not under a huge amount of stress and change in the rest of my life. So for those of us who maybe are not used to the fully remote world or did not have that nice gradual kind of introduction, what advice do you have for people about things like advancing your career when you're entirely remote? Things like grabbing a coffee with your boss or making sure that you are making yourself visible are a little bit less easy or less direct, in this fully remote era. So what advice do you have on making those career advancements outside of the setting that most of us are used to working within? Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, the type of company you work for is a big factor. Companies that are fully remote often kind of go out of their way to embrace the remote culture and ensure that all employees are kind of on the same playing field. So, that's one piece of advice, but we all don't have the luxury of that. Like I've definitely been in companies where I was a remote employee and there were people in the office prior to the pandemic. And sometimes that's hard. So really prioritizing good teamwork and collaboration, making sure that you can find a way to have a level playing field in those conversations is really important. Having a dedicated space in your own house or a space that you can drive to that may be like a co-working space, it can be really helpful for a lot of people. It's also really important to know that that's someplace you can leave. Like having a transition in the remote world, I think is still just as important. Like when you're working in an office, you get in the car, you drive home, or you're driving to the office, you have that time to disconnect, switch gears. But when you're working from home, it's like, I'm gonna roll out of bed and walk over to my desk and I'll be lucky to have pants on or something. But, learn what
it's so true. It's so true.
Learn what transitions work for you. For Mary and I, we like walks and exercise is something that both of us kind of prioritize. So those become really good transitions for us. But everybody kind of has to find their own thing. Have a drink, cook a meal, go play with the kids in the backyard, whatever it is. Find a transition. It's really important. I think Mary also has some things to add to that, so I'll transition to her.
Sure. You're talking about having your dedicated space. If you don't, let's say you don't have an office, you can close the door and walk away and know that now you're in your personal life. I knew somebody that didn't have that, and they would just throw a blanket over their desk. So that was their way of shutting it off. I don't have to look at it. I am now on me time. So just something to be conscious of, because it can burn you out, if you feel like you're always on. And definitely the hybrid is harder because what happens is you might have people in the office that are covering topics and if you're remote, you're not part of. And so I think you have to take extra care when you're in a hybrid situation. But if you're in either way in a remote, I think the thing to be on the lookout for is that you don't become invisible. You turn your camera off, you're not participating, you don't like being on camera because it's more obvious that you're talking different than if you're in a conference room and you're just naturally talking. So I would recommend keep your cameras on, people, come on. And if you're not comfortable talking, at least until you are, come up with a framework. I used to do early on when I was just, when this really more related to public speaking for me, is I had a framework that I learned. It was just like, have your topics, have three points that you want to make, and your call to action. And if you keep like a framework, or different frameworks that you might have for different situations, maybe on a sticky note in front of you that you can refer to when you're in a meeting, it might be that little extra aid for you to speak up, because I think it is important that you don't become invisible, and be participating fully, because just like you would in the office. So you're not going to go hide the bathroom all day. So.
Well, no, I love that advice. The blanket thing, honestly, like there's my mind blown moment for the day. I mean, and I have the luxury, I have the resources, like I have a separate office, but I do use it for multiple things. And so, yeah, it is very, very easy to slip back into that. But Mary, I love what you were saying about kind of maintaining that visibility. As someone who spends just far too much time on camera and like seeing myself on camera, if you are uncomfortable with being on camera, turn off the self view. It will really, it does a ton to kind of eliminate that like self-consciousness, because like you're not staring in a mirror all of the time. And y'all, there's a ton of articles about it, but being able to see yourself all the time and watch yourself talking to people like you're in a mirror, that does some crazy stuff to like our psyche. So read into it, read some more on it if you're interested, but I highly recommend turning off self view to kind of ease that weird feeling. But yeah, Mary, you're totally right. Like if you kind of have to do a little bit extra to stay visible, to stay top of mind for people. Do you think that it's important to speak up in meetings, like to have like ideas and stuff? Or do you think it could be just as important to like raise that visibility and raise your profile by asking questions in the meetings?
I say whatever you're comfortable with, and you'll get more comfortable. The more comfortable you are, the more you'll participate, the more passion you have, the more you'll want to anyway. And then there goes and dives into another whole topic of, frustration. But I won't maybe cover it in a separate one, but anyway, definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
I like that. Okay, so we have a little over 15 minutes left in today's session. We are going to make sure we end right on time, so we can stay good on everyone's schedules and your calendar for the day. Let's talk a little bit about kind of more the long view of your career. Do you have any thoughts or tips on creating and maintaining a brand, like a brand for yourself during your engineering career? I feel like this used to be talked about in terms of like kind of crafting like a professional reputation or your professional persona, but now we talk about it in terms of branding. What do you think, what are your thoughts about kind of creating a brand in an engineering career? Do you think that's something that people should be thinking about early on? Andrew, what do you think?
Some industries definitely have more like more natural brands in careers. But I think, I've definitely hired engineers that don't even have social media. Like they dislike social media. They stay as far away from it as possible. Like you can totally get a job without having a brand in engineering. But I think your like the exposure you can gain by having a brand is definitely worthwhile. It's worth the little extra effort it takes to kind of curate that brand. LinkedIn is a fantastic tool that many of us use every day or at least occasionally. Having a professional profile picture, a good summary, some past work experience in LinkedIn, like as a starter, is usually enough. But you can go even a step further by collecting some recommendations, making sure the recommendations you do collect are in a related industry or from reputable people that you trust, and just not some random person. But really making sure that you put the care and the time into kind of curating that content, and it'll pay itself off. And yeah, so I'd say pay attention to the content you create, spend some time on it. Another really great thing you can do is contribute to open source projects. We kind of tying back into our original topic around like how do you learn, or how might you kick off your career? Open source projects are fantastic. And I'd say it's one of the things I look for when hiring. It's like automatically a nice to have that kind of moves you up in my mind. If I see like, oh, you contributed to an open source project, like that's amazing. I really am excited to talk to you. So yeah, that's what I get.
I like that. Mary, what do you think is important to consider when you're thinking in terms of branding yourself?
Well, all the things that Andrew mentioned are definitely non-starter. You have to do those, I think. I know we have some engineers that don't, but I guess it depends on where you want to take your career and where you are in your career. If you're very young and you have a lot, those things can be sparse, but I think you serve yourself well if you do that. I would also add that as you're growing in your career, and in engineering particularly, and you want to be thought of as a thought leader, that's an excellent platform to do. Those two things is really post things and show your knowledge and share your knowledge with a wider audience, whether it's LinkedIn or another platform. And then in terms of, oh, I'm very passionate about, cloud native, for example, and I'm going to go on this one tooling and participate there, you get a name for yourself if you're an active contributor and you're answering a lot of questions. And so I think if you really own your career and you want to really drive it forward, those are excellent ways of doing it if you choose to.
No, I think it's important, like you said, to kind of highlight that social media is huge, like so much more impactful on jobs, not just within the tech sector, but it's so much more important now than it was even 5 to 10 years ago. It's truly been one of those things that it's like your cover letter, like your resume, like it's one of those things that is core to a job search and core to your career. And Andrew's completely right. When I was still in the talent sourcing division for Power to Fly, like more complete profiles, like it immediately gives that impression that this is a person who cares how other people see them. They not only that, they care about the image that they are projecting onto other people. And you're right, things like having a picture, you don't need to have like the best, like you don't need professional headshots. Like literally all of mine are selfies. They are literally taken on my iPhone. If Beyonce can have an entire album recorded on an iPhone, you can absolutely do your selfie and use that for your profile picture. Just small stuff like that. Absolutely. It's the details where that stuff kind of sings. So completely agree. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, hold on here. There we go. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the glass ceiling moment. I feel like a lot of people have this in their career when it might be early on, it might be later in where you're kind of trying to make that shift from individual contributor up to management or something. But I feel like a lot of people have that moment where they start to realize like, oh, there might be a barrier that I have to break down here of somebody that like maybe doesn't think I'm super great or doesn't see me as the next logical step for this next role or whatever. Have either of you encountered this in your careers? And if you did, how did you approach it? What was the key for you for breaking through that glass ceiling? Mary, let's start with you.
I would say, and maybe I'm a little different. I think that a lot of ceilings are really self-made. They're really your own barriers that you've created in your mind. If you're very passionate and love what you do and you want to get to the next level, you are doing the things, you are seeking advice, you are building that network of people that support you, that get you to that natural level. You're surrounding yourself with people who are highly talented and acting as the sponge. And so I think you naturally can get through the ceilings that way. I know it's not everybody's experience, so I can't speak to that. I know there's some industries where it's just, even in my own, in the history, being the only woman basically on every team I've ever been on in most of my career, it seems intimidating, but I really learned to let my passion drive me and not put in those artificial constraints, and learn some tips on how to deal with the constraints that are real. How do I get my male colleagues, for example, to listen to what I have to say? And so there were things that I had to discover and learn along the way, and that involved reaching out to other people who have similar situations, or, trying different things and learning from them, being self-aware. But I would say, this, don't think of ceilings as being there. That just really limiting to yourself and can make you not think that you can be greater than you are. So my biggest recommendation is just, there are no ceilings. There are challenges that you have, and you learn how to deal with those and master your circumstances. But I don't like the word ceilings. I don't, that's just my personal viewpoint.
No, I'm right with you. Yeah, I think it's also, it's very important because you're right. There are a lot of ceilings out there that are absolutely real. And some of them are just, a couple inches thick. Some of them are miles thick that people are trying to break through. But you're right. That distinction between seeing something and recognizing a ceiling or recognizing a hurdle that exists outside of yourself is totally different than, kind of addressing not only like the ceilings that you might have that you might be kind of, subconsciously imposing on yourself, but that can also have the effect of, kind of making that hurdle seem even higher, even if it's not. So I love that distinction of trying to see, kind of take these things in and figure out, like, is this something that is an external hurdle that I'm going to have to deal with that I can't do anything to change before that? Or is this something that I'm building up in my mind and making into an even bigger problem than it maybe would have to be if I were to just say well, this is where I'm going. It's a path. I don't care that there's a fence in the way. The path is there. This is the path forward that everybody else follows. So why shouldn't I be able to follow the same path? Why shouldn't you, let me keep along moving that trail?
And exactly. And think about when you were, 6 or 7 years old and somebody said, what do you want to be? You didn't have any limits on yourself, right? So why now in your career do you feel like there's these limits?
Yeah. I'm reminded of that woman who said that she was inspired by her toddler's boundless enthusiasm and motivation. The toddler said they wanted to be an astronaut. And the mom was saying something about well, you got to do this and you got to be physically fit and you got to graduate top of your class in school. And here's what you got to do. And the toddler goes, well, that's only 3 things. I can do that. And granted, vastly simplifying the problem, but yeah, okay, that's only 3 things. Now, granted, 3 things with a lot of micro steps, but it's a lot easier to think about these things if you take them in those small chunks. Nobody, what is it? You don't eat a shark all in one bite, or you don't eat a whale all in one bite, something like that. Yeah, I love this. Andrew, what's your feeling on this? What have you seen either in your own career or in the careers of team members?
Yeah, I personally have been blessed that I haven't had super thick glass ceilings in my career. I think a common one that a lot of people in engineering think that is a glass ceiling is kind of like the senior engineering position in general. It can be seen as kind of like a terminal position. Some people don't think that they can make it the next step. They can't become a staff engineer. They can't become a principal engineer. They can't become a manager. But there is a path there. And having a good manager that can walk you through how to kind of make it to the next step is really helpful. And just kind of knowing that it is possible, it's not rarefied air to make it to the next step, and it's also okay to stay a senior engineer. Some people really love the work that they do and they don't want the additional responsibilities. They don't want to be in meetings all day. And that's totally fine. Then it's not even a glass ceiling at that point. You're in a preferred spot. So I don't know, that's the only engineering specific thing I could think about. And I thought about this one last night because I was having trouble answering it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is one of those things it's not something you're going to see always in your career, but when you see them for other people, try and weaken those glass ceilings. Do your best to make this something that, even if you're not the first person that had to go through this, make sure that you are the last person to have to go through this BS. Make sure that if you are in a room, that you're the only person there, like Mary saying, being the only woman on so many teams, that is great. Make sure you're not the last woman that's in that spot. Make sure you are, that you are helping to make that path even a little bit better for the people that come after you. As much as we are possible, we are, each individual people with a lot going on in our lives. All right, we have a couple questions left, and I want to make sure that we leave some time to talk a little bit more about Nacelle. But let's try and do maybe like a popcorn thing, and we'll try and get through like 2 or 3 questions. What do you think are the best kinds of networking events for engineering people in engineering careers to attend? Obviously, I have a huge, huge preference for Power to Fly events. But what are some of the networking spaces that y'all recommend? Andrew, you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't love networking. It's not a preferred task for me, but I still do it. Meetups are really fun. Remote meetups are a thing in kind of the post-COVID era. Just following your passion, it doesn't feel forced. Meetups are a way and have been a way in the past for me to still remain passionate about networking in a way that doesn't necessarily feel like networking. It's just like a bunch of people getting together to hang out and talk about things that they enjoy. Another one that's kind of similar to that is like maker spaces. It might not be totally related to the same industry, but you might meet people that are in related industries. Mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, just people that enjoy and feel really passionate about the things that they're building, pottery, electronics, 3D printing, whatever it is. Like there are tons of paths that cross, and each one can be really important and valuable.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Mary, what are your thoughts here?
Sorry. Basically the same. Meetups were, for me, really helpful when I was looking at brand new technologies, and it was really to get a sense for how are other people using them. And I didn't use them so much to network, and I guess that's took a lot of pressure off, and then networking just naturally happened. But I do love meetups. I prefer more intimate, reaching out to people that I may have met, and can I have coffee, even if it's virtual coffee with you? And I know a lot of people are not as comfortable with doing that, but it's the dividends that it pays is pretty amazing if you can make the time to really foster your relationships, whether it's people internally in your organization that you may not work with every day, or LinkedIn connections that you haven't talked to in a while. Hey, what are you up to these days? Join those groups that you might have interest in. But yeah, I think Andrew touched on the two big ones, and then after that, I would just say make your own connections.
Excellent. Thank you both for sharing those things. Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen in front of you are some questions that we had asked Mary and Andrew about Nacelle. Now, I really want to touch on the top thing, how you would describe the culture at Nacelle, because this is honestly the first part of your answer is one I've never heard before. So let's expand on that idea of low ego. What does that mean within the team culture at Nacelle?
Well,
Mary, you want to go?
Yeah, I go. The low ego means that everybody is open to hearing everybody else's ideas, and nobody is shooting each other down. It's very much, we are all in this ship together, rowing, and nobody is above anybody else. And if they do happen to know more than another person, they're happy to share that information. And it's it's a refreshing environment, I guess. I really love, not only because they have low egos and they're highly collaborative, but they are extremely talented. And that is a unique combination. Sometimes they have very, very highly talented, they know so much, and yet they don't hesitate, jumping on a call with somebody and helping them with their particular issue, or sharing their knowledge, or, doing a little Loom video for somebody on something that they learned. So it's my favorite part.
Very cool. Very, very cool. I love to hear that stuff. All right, we have a little less than a minute. I want to make sure we're ending on time, so we're not going to dig into anything else. Andrew, apologies, you didn't get to tell us a little bit about your tips for interviewing, but thank you all. Thank you so much, Mary and Andrew, for spending this time with us. It has been really wonderful to get to spend the afternoon with you. And I want to extend a very huge thank you to our audience. Y'all submitted great questions for this. We would not be here without you. So thank you to everyone who joined us. Now, if you are new to Power to Fly, if this was your first event with us, Thank you so much for coming. We've been so happy to meet you. And if you are one of our frequent flyers and we see you all the time, welcome back. Thank you so much. We cannot wait to see you on another event in the future. I hope everybody enjoys their weekend. Have a safe, happy, healthy weekend. And I hope that this was a nice way for y'all to end your work week. Have a nice day, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us, Meg.